Well, hello, Liza. I am so glad we are here together now and taking a moment to connect. And I have your book right here to talk about this beautiful book, Soul Medicine
Mm.
for a Fractured World. Um, and I want to, yeah, just welcome you to this space. So thank you for being
Mm.
here.
Thank you so much for your hospitality.
hmm I'm so glad we're here
Me too.
now. And I'm going to just share a little bit. Of course, there's a lot to share about you, but I'll share a little bit about who you are so folks watching and listening can know and also find you at your website to learn more. And then we'll dive into some conversation.
Mhm.
So, Dr. Liza J. Rankow is a spiritual teacher, counselor, activist, and writer. Her life work centers the deep healing that is essential to personal and social transformation. Liza was the founding director of One Life Institute, which for almost 20 years nurtured the well being of frontline changemakers. She is the producer and co editor of the Living Wisdom of Howard Thurman audio collection and author of the award winning book Soul Medicine for a Fractured World, Healing Justice and the Path of Wholeness. You can find more out about Liza and find her at www.lizaranco.org. So, Liza, I want to invite you just to begin by sharing a little bit about. I've just read something, right, about who you are, but I want you
Mhm.
to orient us to who you are, where you are, who your people are, how you come
Mm.
into this space, and just invite us to begin in that way.
Mm. Thank you, Michelle. I am in Oakland, California, and I've been here for oof, 30 years now. And previously, as we've talked about, in North Carolina, which is where
Mm-hmm.
you have been now for some time.
Yeah.
Um, my people, I would have used to answer that first in terms of humans, but I almost want to say my people is the garden and the trees and the clouds, um, the sacred beings that are everywhere, that companion each of us, whether we're aware of it or not. And I also have just a whole cadre of marvelous human folk as well. Um, Many of them in the activist community, many of them creatives, but good-hearted beings who are walking the planet, I think, in a loving way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for starting with the more than human world and your and our relations in that way, and then naming the folks, the activists, the communities you're part of as well, who I know are weaved into soul medicine for a fractured world, as you shared
Mhm.
very many different stories about community and healing and justice. And I have a question, and it's about it's near the beginning of your book about the times we move through and live through right now,
Mhm.
which we both have written about apocalypse and the meaning of that. Um,
Mhm.
and uh, what you wrote about, have written about, is the choice point or inflection point, and how we can um, either be collaborators or casualties, which I really of this time. And you've also
Yeah.
written about nature as a teacher to show us and teach us about cycles, old and new, and this cycle of destruction and creation,
Mhm.
um, new beginnings and endings. And I'm curious to know for you what it means to be a collaborator um, with transformation, given the time we're in and also the choice point that is here.
Yeah. Yeah. And as I'm sure you knew before you asked it, that's not a simple
Mm-hmm.
question with an answer, really. It's more, I think, an invitation of how to live into these times, or the direction that I aim to live into these times, because so often I fall short, right? But part of what arises, particularly when you lift up nature as the teacher, in
Mm-hmm.
how do we go through cycles of death and renewal, and how do we, um, what can we learn from looking at what
Mm-hmm.
earth and nature are teaching us? And one thing is that death is a natural part of the cycle. And the task is not to hasten through it, right? The compost needs to cook in order for the alchemy of transformation. And there's a way that, the humanness of me wants to hasten to the other side of the devastation. Of course, right? We want to ease the suffering, eliminate the suffering. We want to shift the paradigm and live in a just and compassionate world like yesterday, please.
Mm-hmm.
And yet there's a transformation around who we be, the our inner being as the soul of humanity, as the individually but also collectively. That that this time invites us into a deeper maturity, into a deeper reverence for all of life kind in all of its many expressions, and not just humans and technology as somehow the pinnacle of a thing, right? I wish we were quicker learners as a species. And yet, what I know both from history and from nature is that just reform of an unjust system is not going to endure. That we can't, Audre Lorde's master's tools will never dismantle the master's house, right? We might change things around, we might win some constitutional amendments, and then that at the stroke of a presidential pen or a recessive Supreme Court verdict, all those hard-won gains evaporate because there hasn't been a fundamental change in who we be in the dominant worldview. Arguably, the worldview that is the loudest, most visible, most domineering right now is destroying itself.
Mm-hmm.
The structures and the systems of dualism, of separation, of domination, extraction. Empires rot from within and they collapse. And so the choice point is, do we build a new empire? I hope not. Or do we move in a new way collectively as humanity? And there are folks who are already, there are folks who never forgot, of course.
Right.
And there's folks who are remembering, and there's folks who are reimagining. And all of that is happening at the same time as this horrible, immense suffering and destruction. And how do we hold all of that? Not ignore one for the other in either direction, but inhabit the complexity of the both and. That was a long answer.
I love long answers, just so you know. It didn't
Good.
feel long, it didn't feel long to me in that way. And I appreciate all that you spoke to and the polarities and um, the invitation, the offering for us in front of us right now, um, and the acknowledgement of, the power of reimagining, and also the awareness that some folks have always been in that space of imagining and reimagining what's possible,
Hmm.
which in many ways I think soul medicine for a fractured world is part of that reimagining process. um, there are just so many themes in it, and clearly, I mean, it's in the title medicine, but part of the medicine that will help us build something new, or as I often think about, return to maybe ancient
Yes, exactly.
wisdom.
Exactly.
uh, because it's already here. I mean, that's part of what you
Hmm.
spoke to, the
Hmm.
reality, the future. We can bring it into the now. And I'm curious to know for you, and there are many practices weaved in your book. There are a lot of reflection questions, which feel like meditations, and then meditations and different breathing practices and dreaming practices. I'm curious for you, based on this invitation that you shared, like, how do we live into these times? What are some of your practices now in this
Hmm.
present moment, that may be in your book as well, but what are some of the practices that
Hmm.
support you as you respond to this call and invitation?
Yeah. Well, I keep coming back to nature because that is really my deepest support. So I live in a city, but it's a city with backyards and gardens
Mm-hmm.
and trees and little patches of dirt where folks are letting herbs or weeds or some green stuff grow. Um, and that sustains me, I think, in a way that little else does, you
Mm-hmm.
know. When I lived in North Carolina, I was in the country and I took it more for granted, I think. But being in a city, I have to really pay attention. And so I have because there's like a tree and a tree. It's not like the woods.
Right.
And so I have relationships with each, individual tree. And my garden is my sanctuary. I go there and put my feet on the soil and do a lot of puttering, but I also, talk things over and offer prayers and listen, and have been gifted with so many insights that didn't come from me,
Mm-hmm.
by nature. Prayer and
Mm-hmm.
meditation have been part of my practice like forever, ever. Um, I talk in the book about my most of my life journey with chronic life-threatening illness. And so I developed a lot of practices to nourish the body spiritually over the years, to work with energy. Um, and those I continue to do, even though you know, I've got a little better balance health-wise.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and part of why I do is that those practices are part of my ongoingness. Writing is a practice, and knowing which folk to turn to. I was going to say which friends to turn to, and some of it is friends who I would call up and have a conversation with. Some of the folk I turn to are now in the ancestor world who were friends or mentors. And then some of the folk I turn to, I only know through their writing or through their podcast appearances, but who offer a word of insight, a perspective, some wisdom, some reminding. And that also helps me a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing some about your practices. I know there are many, and again, starting with nature in that way, and also um, this shift in language of like friend versus which folk to turn to in your network, and the different ways you might do that based on what you need, um,
Mhm, mhm.
and the kind of medicine that you need, which we know medicine doesn't always taste good, right?
Yeah,
But
and
it is
don't
healing.
let me front that like I know right where to go or when to go,
Yeah,
right? Because there's also the period of just floundering. And
sure.
sometimes it's like, okay, guide me. What? You know?
Yeah.
And very often my first stop in those moments is just to go and sit in the garden.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which I'm guessing you understand well.
I understand that, of course. And I've often said that the more than human world is a place that when nothing else makes sense, it makes sense to me, right? I understand,
Mhm.
I belong to it or can feel into it or watch the natural cycles that have purpose, uh, different than the cycles of creation and destruction that are based in human made chaos, and
Mhm.
disconnection. And um, we both have used this language of cultural amnesia. You use it in your book. This like
Mm.
forgetting who we are and who we belong to.
Mhm.
So yeah, that resonates with me. Um, and it makes me one of my questions because in one of your chapters, chapter 2, you've written about the purpose of our living, and you wrote a lot in there, and also wrote about questions and the importance of questions, which I
Mhm.
love because I love questions. And the being learning to be in that space of inquiry and reflection. That's why I love questions. They also can lead
Mhm.
us to places sometimes when there's urgency about getting to an answer, sometimes that creates constriction versus like
Right.
expansiveness or openness.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
I'm wondering for you, just I know that this chapter was about questions in relation to purpose. And I'm curious for you if you could uplift a few questions that guide you now. Like, you wrote this, it's been a little while, right, ago, and maybe they're the
Mhm.
same questions. And I'm curious to know, like, what are some of those
Mhm.
questions for
Mhm.
you, or questions that you return to, or that come back to you?
Right. 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 Yeah. Well, in that chapter, some of the questions I offer are from one of my
Mm-hmm.
great teachers who's now an ancestor, Dr. Howard Thurman.
Mm-hmm.
And those questions that he put to people have like they have not gotten old for me, right? Because
Yeah.
every time I sit with them, there's a deeper layering, and it begins with who are you? And then a long pause, because Thurman was famous for his pauses, right? So who are you? And then a pause, and then who are you really? So not like what's your
Mm-hmm.
demography, not what's your job,
Mm-hmm.
not any of that, but at that deepest level of beingness, what are the another way to say it is, what are the core qualities that we give life to
Mm-hmm.
in moving in the world in the ways that we do, or that we and or right that we are this is a new language, blooming into. I've never said it that way before, but I kind of
Mm.
like it.
Yeah.
um so it's both something we are already and something that we are ever becoming more fully,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? um and it wasn't a question that you would just like he would ask it and you would answer like we're
Sure.
talking in a conversation. It was a question that then you lived with, you slept with, you dreamed with, you drank, dreamed whatever with. and allow it to whisper its answer to you,
Yeah.
right? Or to find yourself, it just arising. And what my experience has been, Michelle, is that, years ago I thought I had that answer. And it wasn't wrong, but it wasn't complete. Or there was another nuance about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an invitation to me. It is more of a practice than a question where the answer is the thing. It's kind of the practice of living in that asking, living in that seeking, and what that invites, the kind of life that invites. A question that's not in the book that I sit with a lot in these times, right, is what is mine to do in this season of the world?
Mm-hmm.
And because I'm in a new season in my own life,
Mm-hmm.
as I'm moving closer to exiting than entering by some measure, is in this season of my, so it's a double. What is mine to do in this season of my life? And what is mine to do in this season of the world? Which they
Mm-hmm.
overlay each other. But that's really the question. And, hot off the press in terms of my reflection with that question. And I don't think I've shared this with anybody yet. So you, me, and the world. Um, that's always what is mine to do has always been like a doing question. Like
Mm-hmm.
what should I be working on? What should I be creating? What should I
Yeah.
be giving, And it's more in this season about what is mine to be.
Mm.
What is my that this body really can't get out in the streets anymore. My physical capacity is very different than it was in other times. And it feels like my deepest contribution, writing the book was a doing. That was definitely something that I needed to do before I leave here on assignment.
Yeah.
But now it's more what what qualities of presence would best support what's going on in the world, would best support the younger folks who are more in the front lines of it. How can I be a good elder auntie? How can I best be um, a supportive presence? I'm still have a part-time counseling practice, a couple days a week. So that's part of it. And but the recognition of that shift from what is mine to do, like what's the next
Right.
project assignment, to what is mine to be in this more than who am I, but how do I offer that now? In what
Mm-hmm.
in what way would be the most valuable in this season on earth?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm present to the this question of season of life,
Mm-hmm,
and season of the world, this time period, and the question, the shift in doing and being. What is mine to be? Also, what is mine to offer
mm-hmm,
during this
mm-hmm,
season? And it relates to, well, everything, but also one of the themes in your book, which I deeply appreciated and resonated about, one's review of their life, essentially,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and also when we look back, um,
Right.
which is, I found it intriguing because I've thought about that before many times. And also know that for some people thinking about death, and you wrote about this, there, culturally dominant culture is in this context where we are is afraid of death. And so there isn't much preparation or talking about death. We know in
Hmm.
other spiritual lineages, which you've written about, that death is part of life. It is part of the culture. It's
Right.
part of the spirit. It's part of, yeah, everything. It's sort of weaved in.
Hmm.
And um, so the way you've written about it is this invitation to invite people to look at and think about, if you were to look back at your life, what would you see and how would you feel about it? Which very much to
Hmm.
me related to these questions about purpose and the
Hmm.
purpose of living. And I'm and what you just named about eldership, um,
Hmm.
and mentorship is making me wonder. And I had written this question earlier, but I'm feeling it even more now about your own life review and like what you would see, what you might see, and how you
Hmm.
feel about it is what I want to
Hmm.
invite you to share.
Hmm. Well, I talk in the book about how that living in proximity to my own death because of the
Mm-hmm.
illness, um, it gave me this litmus test question that you're kind of alluding to, but let me speak it directly. Is for me what was helpful is if I die without doing fill in the
Mm-hmm.
blank, would I regret it?
Yeah.
Because my regrets are much more about what I left undone than, oh, I did this thing that I really regret having done. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and at different points in my life, in a previous life, in my North Carolina life, in fact, I practiced medicine as a PA in pediatric oncology, and I enjoyed it. It was very fulfilling. But I had to ask myself if I died without having a career in medicine, would I regret it? And the answer was no. But
Mm-hmm.
if I died without doing the deeper spiritual inquiry and teaching and healing work and that pathway, right? There's medicine healing and then there's spiritual medicine healing, right? Western
Right.
allopathic medicine and spiritual medicine. And if I died without doing that one, the spirit one, I would feel like I had missed the mark. And one of the things on that was if I died without writing the book.
Mm.
And that took me a good 20, 30 years of avoiding before I actually did it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so when you ask me, if I were to reflect now, see, you're asking me all these like personal things that are now going out into the ethers, but why not? We're here to learn from each other. We
Yes,
are walking together. All of us are walking
absolutely.
together. And it's not as much, in a way, it's very right on the shoulders of the other thing, my other great disclosure. Um, that I would feel satisfied. I've contributed in different arenas throughout my life that were important to me, all of which revolve around the intersection of spirituality and social justice, of healing individually and collectively. That universe has been my habitation. And I feel good, satisfied, I guess is a better
Mm-hmm.
way, with that and with what I've contributed there. Where I most lament falling short is, I look back at old journals, at messages from spirit, or at things I was ruminating on. And it's like reruns. It's like, what? I'm writing the same thing decade by decade so often. And it's like, what will it take to really integrate it, to really live it, to really not fall prey to the amnesia about
Yes.
the things that we know,
Mm-hmm.
these great epiphanies. And
Mm-hmm.
then if I read back, it's like, oh, I had that epiphany already,
Right.
which is one of the gifts of journaling. Um, and I do feel like I'm getting closer, which is good. And yet, always falling short of where I wish I was. Um, and I think that's just being human,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Maybe I'd be more worried if I wasn't feeling like I needed to.
Yeah. Yeah. You're making me, I'm just I'm smiling and chuckling
Yeah.
because I'm, I'm thinking about the samskaras, the tendencies, the patterns, what
Hmm.
you named. I look back in these journals and I've written the same thing for decades, like the way we live with ourselves, like the
Hmm.
way we,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, and I'm just chuckling at that and the witnessing of patterns, um, and our humanness, right? Like
Yeah.
and we're learning in real time how to be.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and and when you said, I guess I'd be concerned if I didn't notice that, it's like there's consciousness, there's witness
Right.
consciousness happening, which then I think creates the space for change
Hmm.
versus the rote, way
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
being, and how that leads to more amnesia and disconnection. So I
Yeah.
appreciate your
Yeah.
humanness, and your honesty. You're like
Hmm.
going there in these ways, with me. And I have a couple more questions, and I'm thinking about where to
Hmm.
go. But you mentioned, in the title of your book, there's the calling of medicine and soul medicine. You also have a section in your book about, wholeness and restoring wholeness and changing poison into medicine and the
Hmm.
threshold, which we've spoken about the threshold in some way, the time we're
Hmm.
in, the shift we're in. And when I read this about changing poison into medicine, it made me think about a song lyric, which I don't know where the song is from. It was passed down to me from someone, and it was passed down to them. But one line in the song is, "The illness seeks the medicine," and then there are some other verses in it, but the illness seeks the medicine, and changing poison into medicine made me think of that. And I'm
Hmm.
wondering how you see that happening now, like the
Hmm.
I mean, it's alchemy changing poison into medicine, or
Hmm.
the awareness that the illness, the dis-ease, actually seeks the remedy. I'm just curious
Hmm.
about how you see
Hmm.
that. And you name some of that with reimagining, but other ways that you see that
Yeah, I
playing
think
out.
it relates also to the chapter on initiation,
Yes, absolutely.
right? In that going through the extraordinary
Mm,
crises and suffering
mm-hmm,
that completely disrupts our lives,
mm-hmm.
whether it's going through it on a personal level with a catastrophic diagnosis or death or,
Yeah.
breakup or, all of the things that, right, assault, or whether it's the collective initiation, that
Mm-hmm.
we're going through now. And I'm borrowing that as an archetype, right? Not as an appropriation of what it means in any specific culture,
Right.
but as that transformational archetype of going through the fire
Yeah.
in order to become the fuller, deeper, wiser selves, personally, collectively, and to be in service to the whole,
Mm-hmm.
right? I quote in the book from Malidoma Somé, Elder Malidoma, because it's a very vibrant practice in his culture. And he shared in his autobiography some glimpses of his own initiatory process and pointed out that the importance of initiation for maturing
Yeah.
into adulthood, to be a full member in community. And how in the dominant culture, absent those traditional contexts and containers and invitations, absent good eldering, that he says, in the dominant culture, there are ordeals, right? I mean, constantly traumatic ordeals, but without the resolution of completing the process and returning to the community, returning in a new way, returning with a clearer sense of purpose, returning with a deeper maturity, to be a contributing adult in in the larger collective. And I think, that I'm not the only one to notice this or to write about it, that one could look at what we're going through now on the planet as a collective initiation, that the status quo has been upended, that we are in a time of collective, tremendous suffering and ordeal. And you mentioned my something from the book about will we become casualties of it,
Yes.
or will we be transformed by it and rise into our deeper maturity? This will the soul of humanity come into maturity.
Mm-hmm.
And what does it take for us to grow through it to our greater becoming versus to be destroyed by it? And I really think we are at that tipping point, and I don't know the answer. It'd be nice to say, well, just go through the ordeal and come out the other side and had a great life. Well, a lot of people die.
Right.
It's not a guarantee that you're going to survive an initiatory process,
Right.
whether it's in the formal structures of a cultural lineage, or whether it's the erratic ones that we face
Mm-hmm.
in modernity. Um, so what can help equip us? How can we help tip the tide toward the transformation? Uh, I've had a prayer partner for the last 30 years, and we used to joke about the phoenix,
Mm-hmm.
which, the phoenix, the bird, goes in the fire, and then it arises from the flames as this beautiful, glorious bird. But if you yank it out of the fire too soon, you just got charbroiled bird. You don't
Right.
have this beautiful
That's
multicolor,
right.
being of light. And so we would joke like, girl, don't be charbroiled bird, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm making light because not because this is frivolous, but because sometimes we need to laugh in the midst of all the things that are so much larger than any of us can hold.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, Laugh and cry, both, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But it comes to me now to say, one of the elements that is so supportive in individual initiations is having elders who are both holding the space for the initiates and also supporting the integration of the experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so, maybe that's part of the invitation collectively in these times is how do we hold that space and foster each other's transformation and emergence and integration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's going to be, and that's the medicine that each of us contributes. To go back to,
Right.
I
Yeah.
kind of lost what you'd asked me there, but yeah. So going, and there are many ways. It's not just one thing. It's all of us contributing our unique gifts
Mm-hmm.
to that intention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think you lost the thread or
Okay, good,
anything of
because
this. And I think it's making me ponder eldership
hmm
as part of the alchemy or the remedy. It's like the
hmm
transmutative element. It's also part of the remedy. It's also part of it's the outcome too. Eldership, it applies to all the entire weaving of the spell, right? Or changing something from one form into another in the way you've spoken about it as it relates to our medicine, regardless of age, because we're living ancestors. And you've written about being a good, becoming an ancestor.
hmm
And so in your book, and so it feels very like a through line and also feels, yeah, very resonant and relevant for us to think about ourselves as elders the moment we come into these incarnations and
Well, it's a
lineage
both
in that
and.
way.
It,
Yeah,
it's a both and. Um, because we need the whole spectrum.
sure. All of the, I mean,
So,
yes, yes,
I don't think we have to be elders or call ourselves elders to be wise,
absolutely. Yes.
right? And we
Yeah.
need the wisdom of young people and
Yes.
all the points along the spectrum of the life cycle. If we think about ourselves as, this the wholeness that comprises the we,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not that, okay, everybody do this, or everybody be this,
Sure.
or everybody aim for, I know you know this, but I'm just like for
Yeah.
the record, you know,
Yeah.
that, you know, I give thanks for the full breadth of our diversity, that there's a vision, not that there aren't elders who are visionary, certainly there are, but I'm just so grateful and sometimes in awe of the visionary capacity of younger folks.
Yes.
Hallelujah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How can I be a supportive foundation for that?
Yes. Yeah, I think I was feeling into I'm saying elder, but I mean living ancestor. And so
Hmm
it's feeling into that. And really, it goes back to living with purpose. It's like,
It
why are
all
we here?
links,
What are we doing?
right?
How are we doing it? How are we being? Some of the things you've named.
And
And
how are we
yeah,
contributing
right.
to
And what are we
yeah.
contributing? And what is our medicine? And that it matters.
hmm
Um, toward the collective well-being of all, if that's how we effort,
hmm
or be, or if that's central to what we create together or imagine or reimagine. Yeah,
hmm
just feeling into that. I know we're close to time, which is unbelievable because I have way more questions. But I did want to invite you, since there are so many practices in your book, just invite you if you might share a short practice with us.
hmm
Um, yeah, and invite you to take space to do that.
Sure. Well, one of the briefest and I think, most portable in the sense that you can expand it or contract it, but um, is a practice that came to me um, as a gift when I was getting ready to open a group.
Mm-hmm.
And so it came to me as a way to open a group. But it could also be a personal practice. It could be any number of, you know, it's adaptable. And in the book, I call it 3 blessing breaths. So I want to just invite you and anybody listening who's not driving to turn within. And if you're comfortable, allowing your eyes to gently close, or else just allow your gaze to soften with a downward glance, releasing any outward distractions. And just gently becoming aware of your breath, its gentle flow in and out. And as you breathe, you may allow your breath to deepen, to become slower and fuller. As you feel the edges of your body begin to blur a little bit, and your energy expand, feeling your connection with all of life. And I'm going to invite us to take 3 very particular kind of breaths together. On the first breath, I invite you to breathe in whatever qualities of the Spirit that you need right now. It may be healing or peace or clarity, joy or liberation. Just breathe in whatever those qualities are on your in-breath. And as you exhale, imagine that they are pouring into you from the crown of your head, through your body and being, to the soles of your feet and the tips of your fingers, just saturating yourself, nourishing yourself with those qualities. And for this next breath, I invite you to breathe in whatever qualities you want to bless the listening community with. All the people who are listening to this conversation, whether it's in real time or later, all the people who are in your circle of care in your community. What are the qualities you want to bless them with? Breathe those in. And as you exhale, breathe them out as a gift to all those beings that inhabit your life. And on this third breath, breathe in whatever qualities you want to bless the world with. Peace and justice, liberation, wholeness, harmony, well-being. Breathe those in. Wisdom, love, justice. And on your out breath, send them out as a blessing to embrace the world. And know that in your own practice, you can tarry as long as you want with any of those kinds of breaths. You can breathe more cycles in to nourish yourself. You can send that blessing intention out to others, and you can embrace our precious world, our Mother Earth, and all expressions of life within her and upon her. And so as we move toward our conclusion, I invite you once more to bring your awareness to your breath and your own body, to the place where you are seated. Breathing in vitality and peace and wholeness. And as you exhale, gently allow your eyes to open. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Liza. I wanted to thank you for that beautiful practice, the breath, the space, the invitation to bless ourselves and the world. And there's a quote from your book that has come up 3 times today in different spaces I've been in
Mm.
as an offering that I've offered from your book. And it is: the events of the world provide us constant opportunity to have our hearts broken open.
Mm.
In response to atrocity, yes, but also in awe of the beauty. The invitation and the challenge is to stay present to all of it, to allow our hearts to be as wide as the cosmos. So I wanted to thank you for allowing your heart to be as wide as the cosmos
Thank
and
you.
for sharing your heart with us today, and also in your book, A Soul Medicine for a Fractured World, which everyone needs to go get and share in your communities, your spaces, your gatherings with your folk, your people. Thank you for spending time with me today in this way. Lovely to
Mm.
share space with you, Liza.
I
And thanks
feel
for
the
writing
same
your book.
way. And thank you for all of your beautiful volume of work, Michelle, and all that emerges daily. I am nourished by your writing and your work and your being. So it's truly a privilege to share this time with you.
Thank you so very much.
Mhm.